Hello Flatiron people, I'm here to do a video demonstration of my final portfolio project. This is a React Redux front end set on top of a Rails API. So to quickly kind of just walk you through the flow of the app, I created a login section, demo user logs in. And the concept of this app is to build final report card comments for the teachers here at this school that I work at. So what they're going to do is, oh, that stayed there. That's interesting. Refresh this. Okay. So they're going to build build comments by choosing little sentence blocks like this that have been populated from the database with partials of sentences that will help build an entire paragraph. So I'll just get these all out here. And I have some ideas of how to redesign this interface already, but before I go into all that, I want to submit this as is. So you just kind of click along. When you click on this box, it'll show a list, and it'll give you a sentence partial, basically. You click on that, and that will populate this little form on the left. And as you go along, you can choose different sentences that have been pre-compiled in order to build quickly, I need another pronoun there, but you get the idea, quickly a comment for this student. I mean, these teachers have to do like 300 comments, so this helps them do that quickly. I'm having some footer problems, which I need to work on. But you get the idea. You can build a comment very quickly by just clicking on these boxes. Now, when I save this comment, as you can see, this fired off to my database backend in Rails and committed this entire string to the user, demo user, that was logged in. And when they go to their comments, your comments, it will show them the entire comment that they created, which then they could either just copy and paste, or maybe I'm going to figure out a way to export this into a CSV to re-import it back into the PowerSchool system we use here at school. But this page, when you click your comments, is also firing a API fetch request from the Rails backend. So to show you some of the, and then log out. So all these routes were done with React Router. Here it's loading the entire comment, putting it there. Maybe that's a mistake. But I'll show you the code. So I'll start from the top down. So here's our index.js file. We are loading the store here. The store is being created here using the redux create store component module. We're also applying a couple pieces of middleware, thunk, in order to do async fetch requests using Redux. And the logger is just logging out the current state every time it changes to console log, which helps troubleshooting. Going down to app, importing everything. In this app, this is kind of serving as my main router, where I have at the top of this return the router module that's being imported from, where is it? Browser router, importing it as router from React Router, and importing routes. So basically these routes just will, it'll look at the URL, the location, and it'll render this component if that location is the same as this. Exact true is just saying it has to be exactly this path. So you can use, if you don't use exact true, then this is kind of how you build your template. So the header and the footer will always be there because it's always going to show, just that home route will always be there regardless of where else you are. Now, I made some user routes and some guest routes, depending if they're logged in or not. Authentication is happening on the back end in Rails using decrypt. So basically, when the user logs in and submits that form, it's sending a fetch post request to create a session in, I can show you the controller for that, in Rails. It's sending a post request here, and that's creating or finding the user, and it's authenticating them right here with decrypt, making sure their password that they posted is the same as the one when you hash it in the database. Returning a status 200 and returning the user stringified. And that comes back to here in Redux. I have a few different actions. For my actions, I reserved creating an entire action file for fetch requests. So all the fetch requests are happening here. This is a session fetch request, logging in the user that's dispatching asynchronously to this URL. Method post, give it a header. The body is this user object, which is basically the email and password they're logging in with. That dispatches a couple methods. Logging in is just the initial one, and then when it finishes, logged in method, or action rather, to here. And this will return the state. Logging in is no longer true. He's already logged in and he's authenticated, and we set his ID here. And the current user, I want to store his name right here. Great. And then I have a logout action, as you can see here as well. So this is the one managing all the comments. Fetching the comments happens at the very beginning when you first open the app. That's the first thing that happens, that fetches all these comments, I believe. Maybe when I click Comment Builder. I think it's when I click Comment Builder. This component, once it mounts, will then send a fetch request, which is this asynchronous, using thunk, through here, fetch comments, asynchronous fetch request, and it will dispatch finally this action, fetch comments, which sets the comments to the Redux state here. I had a lot of trouble making sure I wasn't mutating state. There's a huge learning process on how to correctly return state without mutating it so that it renders as an update and doesn't throw any weird bugs into my code. I also had some problems making sure, let's see, here's a good example. Because as set state is done asynchronously, there was a couple things that required waiting until that set state was finished in order to render. So I have this little switch in my state here, category loaded. Is the category loaded? If so, I can render some components. And that can't render until I know all this is already loaded. So that was a way to get around that, which since I've realized there is a way to write set state so that it forces it to do it synchronously instead of asynchronously, but this was my workaround for now. And then, here's all my different components. So these are my containers. My main builder container, my main show container. This is just the nav bar at the top, which I made it its own container, which changes the nav bar links depending on if the user is authenticated yet or not. And here's all the different components. Dropdown is not being used right now, but I want to save this code because I might use it later. But everything else is. So partials is wrapping partial. This is just generating a list of those little sentences. This is generating the list of the sentences. This is generating one sentence. This component, and I know this is probably not the way it's normally done, is at the very end of this hierarchy. So therefore, in order to get this selection, when they click on it, to store in my other containers, show container, I went through a couple different ways. I passed it up in callback functions all the way back to the top, to app, all the way back down. Which seemed a little silly, so I decided to just connect this to Redux as well. And this will just update state once a selection is made, which has made it much easier, because now when show connects to states, all it does is just print what is in state. And when I submit that form, it grabs what has been submitted, what has been set as a selected sentence, sends it with the user ID, and that's where I send another fetch post request. Well, I guess this is my only fetch post request. Save comment. Or it's my second one, sorry, the session does it as well. Here. This is creating a stringify body from the comment content. I don't need that console log anymore. Saving the this is doing it asynchronously again with thunk. We're saving the comment action just to let us know that's in process. Posting this URL with this user ID in it, so that therefore in my routes, I can use a nested route in Rails, which I had a little trouble. Oh, no, I got it to work. So I'm using a nested route there. So the user's comments, and it's posting to the comments controller. User comments posting here. We'll create a user. It'll post here. Create a user. Find the user. Create a comment. Set the user's comments with that comment. Associate them. Save it. Send it back. And then this is how I send all comments is through this action. So this was a great project. I had a lot of fun, and it was super, it really pushed my limits as far as learning how to wire up a back end and a front end completely separately via Rails and React. So thanks for watching the video. I'm excited to do the review with the section lead and go over everything. And yep, thanks a lot. Take care.